And this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, higher learning courtesy of Udacity. The online education platform just kickstarted its new Intro to Self-Driving Cars Nano Degree program. We'll hear from founder Sebastian Thrun. Plus, Twitter's direct message on terror. The company flagged 300,000 accounts this year. It says promote global extremism. How effective is Twitter's defense mechanism at limiting the spread of hate? We will discuss. And Equifax continues to unravel. We'll dig into reports the credit monitor was hit by hackers months before it told the world the personal data of 143 million Americans may have been exposed. But first, to our lead. A group representing U.S. venture capitalists is suing the Trump administration over its decision to delay enactment of an immigration rule impacting foreign entrepreneurs. The suit says the Department of Homeland Security violated federal administrative rules when it delayed the start of the International Entrepreneur Rule. The rule would permit international entrepreneurs with an ownership interest in U.S.-based startups to stay in the U.S. for 30 months or more in order to build their businesses. Some criteria they would have to meet include starting the company within 5 years of applying, owning at least 10% of the venture, and having qualifying U.S. investors totaling at least $250,000. The rule's critics call it a stopgap measure that could complicate the risks associated with business in the U.S. With uncertain foundations. Joining me now to discuss, Bobby Franklin, the CEO of the group leading the suit, the National Venture Capital Association, and Eric Hippo, managing partner of Lara Hippo Ventures, our guest host for the hour with me here in the studio. Also, Alex Wayne, who covers the White House for Bloomberg News. Alex, I'm going to start with you. What do you make of this?
It's an interesting lawsuit. It'll prove a test case, really, because this isn't the only rule that the Trump administration, Obama-era rule that the Trump administration has sought to delay and then eventually get rid of. The suit, as I understand it, challenges whether the Trump administration can do this without opening a comment period first. Now, I think it's kind of a weird rule that the Trump administration is trying to rescind. It seems like it would normally fit into the sort of category of immigrants that the president would like to see more of in the United States. He has advocated for a merit-based immigration system. But I think what's happening here politically is twofold. One, Trump is really trying to establish his legacy as erasing Obama's legacy, including just about every rule that Obama issued late in his presidency. And two, there are serious immigration restrictionists within this administration, people who think there should be lower legal immigration overall. And so by repealing this rule, those folks are probably trying to achieve some of their goals.
Bobby, why file this suit? What do you hope to accomplish?
Well, we hope to get the rule enacted. We hope to make sure that DHS is in a position to accept applications. Emily, this is about a competition that the U.S. is in with the rest of the world. And other countries are literally rolling out red carpets. You look at Canada, you look at Great Britain, France, Singapore, all across the globe, they recognize that there are talented entrepreneurs. They're trying to attract them to their countries to start and grow this new company on their soil. And what are we doing? We've got red tape. It's not a partisan issue. It's not against President Trump. It's not against President Obama. In fact, both of them have talked about the importance of bringing international entrepreneurs that can frankly get capital anywhere across the globe, bringing them here to our country and making sure that we grow U.S. jobs and the economy.
Eric, you're an immigrant, you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor. What's your take?
Well, my take is that foreign entrepreneurs coming to the United States is a very desirable thing to do. About half of our companies have at least one member of the original team, the founding team, who is an immigrant. I'm an immigrant. And these are people who make huge contributions to our economy, to our society. And I don't see why we would make it difficult for them to come. And as Bobby just mentioned, they can go elsewhere. They can go to Canada, they can go to France, they can go to other places. We are competing with other nations.
Obviously, President Trump's explanation here is creating U.S. jobs, making sure that U.S. workers have a place to work. Bobby, what about the idea that this is merely a stopgap measure anyway, when immigration reform in general is broken?
Well, it is broken, and we've been working on this issue for many years. Back in 2013, we had the opportunity to get a startup visa passed through the U.S. Senate, but it didn't make it all the way into law. Each year, we work with Congress to try to get them to pass legislation. There are bills in this Congress introduced by both Republicans and Democrats that would create a startup visa to make it easier for these entrepreneurs to come here and start companies. But in the absence of legislation making it into law, we have to do what we can. And DHS promulgated a rule. They went through comment and notice, and we had a rule ready to take effect July 17th, and 1 week before that, DHS decided to rescind that. We don't think they followed the proper procedure under the Administrative Procedures Act, and it's the only thing that we have to go on right now to try to get more entrepreneurs here in our country.
Now, Alex, obviously there have been conflicting messages from the administration when it comes to this, when it comes to DACA, when it comes to immigration reform in general. What are the next legislative steps that we actually expect to see in the coming days and weeks when it comes to, taking action on what the president has signaled?
So the priority in the immediate future is to do something about DACA, the so-called dreamers, these young immigrants brought to the country illegally by their parents. Democrats say they struck a deal with Trump to deal with to handle that issue, resolve that issue. I have not heard anything, any kind of a legislative resolution of this issue, entrepreneur immigrants. So I would not expect that to be tackled by Congress in the near future, if at all. Perhaps it could be part of a comprehensive immigration bill, but that's way in the future. That's not even under consideration right now.
So, Eric, have any of these moves impacted your entrepreneurs in any way? I mean, are people nervous? Are they changing their plans?
Well, by definition, we back people who are here legally, who are with a visa or because they're here under whatever form. So, but the community is nervous. The community is saying, I was welcome when I came here, and this is my dream. My dream is the United States. It's why I'm here. Why is this changing? Why am I not part of this great community? So there's a great degree of anxiety within the community.
All right, Bobby, any response to the lawsuit so far?
Not yet, but we'll take the next steps. We'll likely file an injunction to try to get DHS to move forward. Stay tuned.
All right, Bobby Franklin, CEO of the National Venture Capital Association, Alex Wayne of Bloomberg News. Thank you both for joining us. Eric Hippo, managing partner of Lara Hippo Ventures, and my guest host for the hour. You are sticking with me. All right, a story we are watching. Twitter announced the appointment of Patrick Pichette to the company's board of directors as a new independent director. Pichette, of course, served as CFO of Google from 2008 to 2015. This move is effective December 1st. And in a separate move, Hugh Johnson will resign his seat on the Twitter board effective October 1st. Johnson has accepted a new director role on the board of directors at Microsoft. Coming up, Udacity has partnered with Lyft to work on self-driving technology. We'll hear from Udacity founder Sebastian Thrun about the deal and the future for autonomous cars next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Uber is suing the advertising agency Fetch Media for click fraud, alleging that the firm improperly billed the company for fake online ads and took credit for app downloads it had nothing to do with. Fetch is owned by Japan's Dentsu, the world's fourth largest advertising company. As part of the suit, Uber plans to seek at least $40 million in damages, according to people familiar with the matter. Well, TechCrunch Disrupt 2017 kicked off this week in San Francisco, and one person in attendance, Udacity founder Sebastian Thrun. Udacity, an online learning platform, just announced it is opening registration for a new Intro to Self-Driving Cars Nano degree. This is alongside a new partnership with Lyft, which is funding 400 scholarships for the program. Udacity founder Sebastian Thrun joined Bloomberg TV from the event earlier and discussed the partnership.
Self-driving car is the buzzword of 2017. Everybody talks about it, the government, and we all understand if they succeed, there'll be more than 1.5 million, 2 million jobs on the line. We want to help everybody to become an engineer in this space and be a contributor. So when we come to Udacity, you can actually learn how to be a self-driving car engineer and join Silicon Valley and many other companies in building these amazing technologies.
And in partnering with Lyft on these 400 full scholarships, are you explicitly aiming to target, say, women and minorities, those who might not be your typical applicants?
Yes, Udacity has a very strong social mission. We try to bring in minorities, we try to bring women, people of color, and also geographically we have a very strong presence in the Middle East as our corporate contribution to the Middle East to make sure that young people in the Middle East have a new perspective to life. But the core of all this is we really care about people to learn something interesting and participate. So many of us are left behind, smart people are left behind, and the universities are not taking care of us. We really at Udacity try to reach people of all ages, all geographies, all ethnicities, and all financial backgrounds.
I want to ask you more broadly about what's going on in this self-driving car space, because clearly there's a great deal of excitement. But what we've seen from the likes of Google and Apple is that they've quite fundamentally recalibrated their plans. Why do you think that's happening? What is it about the industry that's forcing them, in a sense, to make these changes?
I think it's still a tough technical problem. We still don't have a car that would be what we call level 5, where you can just fall asleep and drive safely. But the race is on. In the last, I say, 2 years, the number of startup companies and even the number of big OEMs have joined the game has been staggering. If you look at the automotive industry today, I would say the self-driving car is the hottest topic that ever existed.
So how do you know that you're creating a program for them, a training program for them that's actually going to be right, given the speed at which this technology is adapting and moving? And how much does it cost? And what job translation have you seen of those students that have taken your program? How many of them are actually getting jobs in the industry?
So our program costs less than $2,500, which is nothing compared to college tuition. Udacity as a university builds its content directly with companies like Mercedes and Google and Tesla and many others. And those companies vouch for it. They are, so to speak, our accreditors. The original program, which was launched here last year, got over 40,000 applications. And even though not a single nanodegree has been bestowed, over 60 people already found jobs in companies like Ford and Volvo and Google and many, many others. It's just a new way of teaching. It's a new way of building a university. We strongly believe the companies that hire our graduates are the ones who should be responsible for the syllabus and help us making it perfect.
Are you going to be signing up with the likes of Tesla, potentially Apple in the future, to provide them with talent in order to facilitate the growth in this industry, do you think? Is that your plan?
Yeah, and that's what we've been doing all along. So when you come to Udacity and learn, say, about deep learning, artificial intelligence, really hot topics, the people instructing you are from IBM, they're from AT&T, they're from Google, they're from Facebook, leading companies in this space. We see ourselves as a platform that makes these leading industries give them a voice in education and reach people, so that when students take those classes, they eventually have a really good chance finding a job. I should say, we've been operating for many years now. We recently did a survey among our students, and roughly half of our students find a new job, Harvard graduates, within the first 6 months of graduation.
Sebastian Thrun there speaking with Bloomberg TV from the TechCrunch Disrupt conference in San Francisco. Coming up, the biggest cities in America are bidding to be the next location for Amazon's second headquarters. So which locales are at the top of the tech giants' lists? We will discuss next. This is Bloomberg. With a little less fanfare than Apple last week, Amazon is out with an update to one of its products. The company debuted a new version of its Fire HD 10 tablet that has a high-definition screen for watching video and up to 64 gigabytes of storage, a lower price, and a processor that runs 30% faster. The most significant new feature, though, is hands-free voice control, which lets users do similar acts like the Echo speaker introduced earlier this year. It'll be available next month. Amazon is still on the hunt, meantime, for a city that could be the home of its second headquarters. If New York City secures the bid, Brooklyn could be the big winner. The $5 billion corporate compound is expected to create 50,000 jobs over the next 15 to 17 years. A New York City real estate firm says Brooklyn's reputation as a hub for millennials could give it a leg up, though the borough has come up short so far in attracting big-name companies. Still with us, Eric Hippo, managing partner at Lara Hippo Ventures. We have to talk about this, of course, because we're in New York today. What do you think the likelihood is of Amazon ending up here?
Well, we would love it, obviously. 50,000 tech workers or quasi-tech workers in Brooklyn, that would be fantastic. I think the chances are pretty low. New York is a very expensive place to set up a business. And we, in the current administration, New York is not particularly business-friendly. So I'm not even sure that New York is bidding.
Where is business-friendly under the current administration?
Well, no, I was talking about the local administration, but I think that that New York should be looking for those kinds of opportunities, because those are the kinds of jobs that are higher paying, that are information based, etc., that we need. But I don't know that the city of New York is actually even actively looking at attracting them.
So what do you think Amazon should be looking for in a second headquarters? Since it can't build out its headquarters in Seattle, they're at capacity. What should it be looking for elsewhere?
I think it needs a city or a place where there is a lot of higher education, a lot of young people that who are looking for the jobs of the new economy, and a business-friendly environment.
We do have a soundbite from the mayor of Philadelphia. Obviously, a lot of cities competing for this now. Take a listen.
We've gotten criticism about the corporate tax breaks and that, like, this is too big of a deal, and there's too many jobs, and it's too great of a company for us not to go after it, and we would love to have it here. We have a lot of folks who could use the work, and we have a lot of IT startups and tech companies that have come into Philadelphia recently.
So Philadelphia throwing their hat in the ring as well. How does the city benefit?
Well, you do have to give them some tax breaks, I imagine. But on the other hand, you're providing 50,000 really good-paying jobs that of people who will pay taxes themselves and who will buy local products and services. So it's a definite plus for a city. New York just opened the Cornell Tech, and Bloomberg is very much involved with that. So it would actually go really well with attracting the headquarters or the second headquarters of a big tech company.
And I wonder if New York would do a good job of attracting younger talent. I mean, who doesn't want to move to New York, right?
Exactly. New York. That's why I'm in New York. Most of my companies are here. It's a great place for startups. Most people love to be in New York. There's a lot of diversity and a lot of things to do. But the city needs to have a plan in place to be able to attract a company like Amazon.
How would you describe the evolution of New York's tech scene? I mean, obviously, it's always played second fiddle to Silicon Valley to a certain extent, though, many of the big tech companies have offices here as well, and the scene is changing. How much closer is Silicon Alley to Silicon Valley these days?
Well, today, Silicon Alley or New York is the second largest center of technology in the United States, one of the largest in the world. What New York does what it's good at. New York is good at software development. New York is good at applications and services. We're not going to be reinventing the plumbing of the internet. We're not going to create the next generation of routers. However, we're starting to see robotics companies. We're starting to see, all kinds of companies in all kinds of sectors, because we have access in New York to the same technology that people in Silicon Valley have.
When's that $10 billion company going to be coming out of New York? That $10 billion tech company?
Oh, hopefully it's in the pipeline. There's a whole number of companies which have reached $1 billion, at least in the private market valuation, that I think have the potential to be one of those companies.
All right, Eric Hippo, Lara Hippo Ventures, you are sticking with me. Thank you. Speaking of Sprint and T-Mobile, Masayoshi Son, Sprint's chairman and CEO and founder of SoftBank, sat down for a wide-ranging interview with David Rubenstein, co-founder of the Carlyle Group, on a show Peer-to-Peer. Rubenstein started by asking Son if he thinks the deal will get approved.
I don't know, but it's their decision. But I think it makes sense not to have just a two duopoly with such a big market share and making ton of profit, and two little ones. So instead of two gigantic oligopoly, three real fight is a better competition. That's my belief. But at the same time, we have another company as a possibility that we may consider to do it. So we have not decided one or the other. We are looking at in parallel.
Masayoshi Son there, Chairman, CEO, and founder of SoftBank on the David Rubenstein Show, Peer-to-Peer Conversations. That airs on Bloomberg Television. Coming up, another twist in the Equifax breach. New revelations: the company was hacked 5 months before it was revealed to the public. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Mark Crumpton in New York. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of First Word News. The Associated Press reports the death toll from the magnitude 7.2 earthquake that struck near Mexico City is now up to 44. It's Mexico's second major earthquake this month. President Enrique Peña Nieto, who attended the UN General Assembly in New York, is returning to Mexico. Meanwhile, officials say one person has died on Guadalupe after being hit by a falling tree. It's the first death reported in the Category 5 Hurricane Maria. At a meeting with the Emir of Qatar, President Trump denied reports that he warned Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates against taking military action in Doha. That's after reports both Gulf nations were looking to remove the Qatari regime. The Saudis and neighboring allies broke off diplomatic ties with Qatar after accusing the country of sponsoring terror. The U.S. Senate held a confirmation hearing today for John Huntsman, President Trump's nominee to be ambassador to Russia. Huntsman took a firm stance against Moscow for its interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
There is no question, underline no question, that the Russian government interfered in the U.S. election last year, and Moscow continues to meddle in the democratic processes of our friends and allies.
Republicans and Democrats on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee say Huntsman is highly qualified for the job. British police have arrested a third suspect in connection with the bomb that partially exploded on a London subway last week. Authorities say they arrested a 25-year-old man in Wales under the Terrorism Act. Two other men arrested over the weekend are still in custody. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. here in New York, 7:30 Wednesday morning in Sydney. My colleague Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Well, another positive day in the US with markets hitting record highs again. So it's going to be another positive day in the Asia Pacific as well. We already had Nikkei futures traded out of Chicago up better than 0.1%. Waiting on the trade balance for August out of Japan. That's expected to narrow significantly to 104 billion yen. That's about 930 million US dollars, with exports increasing by 14.3%. Here in Australia, ASX futures also trading 0.25% higher. Iron ore dipped, though, down 4.1% to below $70 a tonne, so the resources sector may weigh today. Elsewhere, we should get the New Zealand second quarter balance of payments out very soon, estimating a $900 million deficit there. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Now to a story we are following. There's more bad news for Equifax, the credit monitoring company that revealed that they also suffered a major hack back in March, nearly 5 months before the date it publicly disclosed. The company claims that this breach was not related to the July 29th hack that exposed the sensitive data of 143 million customers, a breach that it did not reveal until September 7th. Now, after Bloomberg reported on the March breach, the company said it experienced a security incident involving a payroll-related service during the 2016 tax season. The company also revealed that 100,000 Canadian customers were affected by the September 7th breach. Joining me now to discuss the latest in this ongoing saga, Bloomberg's Mike Riley, and still with us, Eric Hippo, managing partner at Laurel Hippo Ventures. Eric, you are shaking your head. Mike, it is so hard not to read these stories and not get incredibly angry. It just gets worse and worse. What do we know about this new breach and how much they knew before they told the public?
We don't know a lot because they're not being particularly clear about what they knew, but we do know a couple of important things. One is that they had a major security investigation going on starting in March and going through May. They hired Mandiant, the same cybersecurity firm that they brought back in July. And they were doing a pretty extensive investigation for 3 months. Now, a company like Mandiant, that's a pretty expensive prospect. But the most interesting thing, if you look at their timeline of the July incident, the one that they found out about July, is the hackers, even though they found out about the theft of this data in July, when they did the investigation, when Mandiant came back in, they discovered that the data was stolen in May, which would have put it right in the middle of this earlier investigation. So there's a question of like why that wasn't found, how you could have a company like Mandiant examining your networks and other things and just miss the presence of a hacker in your network and the theft of this kind of data. It also raises just questions about what the executives knew when, whether they knew that the company was having multiple security problems at the time they did trades in May and in late July, early August. So again, it raises just all sorts of questions. And one of the things that's clear is, when a data breach like this, you want to be as transparent with the public as possible, and you want to do it as early as possible. And we just keep getting a trickle of new information almost daily now.
It feels like a mess, and it feels like they're not being transparent at all. I mean, Eric, you probably have a credit card, right? You're probably among the 143 million people, just like everyone else.
Well, it's shocking to me that, first of all, that the CEO of that company is still the CEO of that company. I don't understand what the board of directors is doing. But I think what we're realizing here is that our data is ending in these credit service bureaus without us knowing about it. I mean, we suspect, of course, we get a credit score and all that, but they collect very sensitive information about us without really our authorization. So the least you would expect is that the most important job that they do is to maintain that data safe. If you have information on the majority of American citizens, you have to expect that the whole hacking world is going to come after you.
That's your one job, is to make sure it's protected.
And as your colleague just pointed out, if there is any kind of breach, then you need full transparency, because how are we possibly going to be able to trust those people again?
So, Mike, you are getting new information about the motivation of these hackers, potentially that they were interested in getting into the big banks. What more do we know about the end goal of these attacks?
Well, again, we don't know a lot because the company isn't telling us a lot. But keep in mind, one of the things we just know is that if you have hackers in your system, and a system like Equifax, they're probably not just going to look for one thing, even something as valuable as Social Security numbers and birth dates on 143 million U.S. consumers, because Equifax serves a really key part of the financial infrastructure of the country in general. It has direct links between its system and the bank systems through APIs. And one of the things we did find out is that there's evidence that some hackers, use those APIs to get into at least one major bank in Canada. Now that raises all sorts of questions about what else the hackers did with their time in Equifax. I mean, keep in mind, again, that by their own timeline, they discovered the breach at the end of July, but the hackers had been in there since at least middle of May. And when they took the big stash of data, what were they doing over the next 4 months? That's the real question.
Equifax did announce the retirement of a couple of senior executives, but there's still a lot of questions surrounding this share sale, this executive share sale that happened. I mean, how is this fitting into the timeline of what we think they knew when?
Well, it raises some really interesting questions, and their timeline is very specific, but it doesn't have much wiggle room. Basically, what they're saying is they learned about the hack on July 29th. The share sales, like one group of share sales happened at the beginning of August, but there's a handful of days, 2 or 3 days, between the time they learned and the time that sale occurred. They are basically saying that the executives didn't know about the hack in the span of those 3 days. And even the people we've talked to who work at Equifax say that just seems really unlikely. I mean, a company like this has a protocol for what they do when they're hacked, and that protocol entails briefing the executives within a short period of time, and certainly not 3 days. So it does raise a lot of questions. We do know that the U.S. prosecutors have opened an investigation into those sales because they want to find out what those executives knew when and whether or not they violated insider trading laws. And so that last question, so what is the recourse for consumers here? Well, so keep in mind, this is a very different tack than, say, Target, because credit card numbers is a temporary thing that you can just cancel and reissue. What these hackers potentially got was very specific data that's at the center of our financial identities, birthdays, social security numbers, and other things. This is something that could be used to steal our identity, anytime over the next in the next decades over our lifetimes. So consumers can do short-term things. They can get credit monitoring that Equifax is offering for free. They can also try and freeze the access to their credit reports, which is typically a hard thing to do in a short-term measure. But what do they do 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, when this data is still being used to steal identities? Devastating. All right, Bloomberg's Mike Riley, thanks. Can't wait to see the scoop you bring us tomorrow. Eric Hippo, my guest host for the Hour of Laro Hippo Ventures, you are sticking with me. All right, well, Alibaba is said to be planning to invest up to $150 million in Best's IPO. The Chinese logistics provider is seeking as much as $495 million after it reduced the price range and existing investors decided not to sell stock. Alibaba was already Best's biggest shareholder before the IPO with a 23.4% stake, according to a regulatory filing. Coming up, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee is planning to call Facebook before a hearing to discuss Russia's meddling on the platform leading up to the U.S. election. We'll discuss next steps next. This is Bloomberg. One of the hottest areas for mergers and acquisitions has been media and telecommunications, with mega deals like AT&T's deal to buy Time Warner for over $105 billion and Discovery's purchase of Scripps for $15 billion. The Bloomberg Daybreak Americas team spoke to Fred Turpin, global head of media and communications banking at JP Morgan, and asked why media M&A is so hot.
It's been one of the most dynamic periods in our industry in my entire career, and the reason is that all of the industry winners in what we used to call the wireless sector, the cable sector, the content sector, they've all now realized that they're in the same business, which is either consumer broadband or media content. And the level of convergence that we've seen has really been unprecedented. The smallest company at this game board is close to $50 billion, so this is not small ball. And the amount of rumors that we've seen, over the last 6 months about deals that might happen, I think has also been unprecedented in my career. But I think it's actually instructive to look at some of the deals that you mentioned in terms of the deals that have happened. What do they say about where the industry is going and how it's different?
So let's do that. Let's take a look at Discovery first with buying Scripps.
Sure.
That is two content companies getting together and becoming a larger content company, but still a relatively modest-sized company compared to some of the companies you're talking about.
Yes. Well, and I think it has some elements of a more traditional deal in that it's two content companies coming together, but it's different from deals we've seen in the past in that The focus of both companies is very much nonfiction lifestyle programming. And when you think about a world where content is going to be distributed to consumers over multiple platforms with much more consumer choice over the internet, over cable, over satellite, the ability to control or to really have excellence in a particular consumer demographic, I think is going to be more important than it's ever been before. And the deal allows Discovery to really enhance its position both from a scale and a production perspective in nonfiction lifestyle.
But they're still dependent on other people to distribute it.
They are,
deal.
But that distribution is getting broader and broader, and customers have more opportunities to access content than they've ever had, either through the internet or their cable provider, even through their cellular phone.
Well, moving on to sort of technology and what the big M&A opportunities are there. I spoke with Greg Lemkow, who's the co-head of investment banking over at Goldman Sachs, and he had some interesting things to say about the big guys and what they could buy. Here's what they had to say.
The two places I'd be most focused on for activity are TMT, the tech, media, telecom sector, and in technology in particular. You know, you've got the biggest companies in the world by market cap and with massive cash balances. So Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple have largely not been participants in big scale M&A. You know, you've started to see them dip their toe. Amazon did a kind of an interesting transaction on Whole Foods, and I think to the extent those companies who've got the ability to go in multiple different strategic directions get active on the M&A side, you could see some very big transactions happening. On the media telecom side of TMT, there are probably 8 telecom cable wireless companies in the U.S. that are all eyeing each other up, looking to consolidate, and you could see that turn down to 5 or 4 or 3 in the next handful of years. So there's some big transactions that could occur.
I'll let David handle the media part, but for the tech part, I mean, we've been used to seeing the smaller kind of add-on deals in the space. I mean, are we going to see the big guys making big acquisitions? Well,
I think the big guys that you're going to see continue to think about consolidation are really the communications companies that he referred to. I mean, in the AT&T transaction for Time Warner, I think is an example of that. 5 years ago, we would have thought a communications company spending $100 billion on content would be very unusual. But today, it doesn't seem that way, because what's most important today is to maintain consumer engagement and advertising engagement, which is what the internet companies have been very good at. And to the extent that AT&T is able to expand its brand portfolio and leverage that across its satellite distribution, its wireless distribution, and its terrestrial distribution, it gives it more opportunity to engage with customers and to be more relevant to advertisers in the same way that Google and Facebook and some of the companies that Greg mentioned are.
So where is your pipeline strongest?
I would say it's as busy as it's ever been. We're seeing a level of strategic dialogue across all the sectors that we cover that's probably unprecedented in my career. The challenge is sometimes there's more smoke than there is fire, and obviously every day the media has a new rumor about another $100 billion mega deal that's being rumored, and by next week it'll be a different one. The challenge that we have is, and Greg mentioned, the companies, if there are 15 or so companies that are going to basically determine the future of consumer broadband in America, the smallest one is $50 billion. And more than half of them are controlled and run by a founder CEO. And so, these are folks who have been massive winners in this Game of Thrones for the last 20 years. And if you could tell me, who's going to wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm willing to do a deal with you, and I'm willing to step back and let you run the combined company. If you could tell me which of those CEOs and fantastically successful founders would make that choice, then it would be very easy to figure out what would happen here. But that's very hard.
Fred Turpin, their global head of media and communications banking at JP Morgan, still with us. Eric Hippo, managing partner at Laro Hippo Ventures, who was CEO of the Huffington Post for a time. So what do you think? Will we see more media M&A, and if so, where?
Oh, for sure, because the traditional media companies need a bigger digital footprint, bigger digital platforms. They need to acquire technology. Mm-hmm. They're basically not technology companies. And for the native media technology companies to be part of a bigger group gives them more resources, gives them more opportunity to distribute their content. So it's a win-win for both.
So do you see a big consolidation happening?
I do see. I don't know how much of a consolidation, but if you look at the deceleration of subscribers on cable, I think this is motivating a lot of people to say, wait, this uncoupling of the cable world is happening a lot faster than we expected. We better prepare. Well, as we're cash rich, we better prepare for the future.
All right, Eric Hippo, you are sticking with me. Coming up, as we've been talking about, Sprint and T-Mobile are in continued merger talks. The sides are said to have agreed that Deutsche Telekom would have control in a combination of the two companies. According to a person familiar with the matter, the mobile operators are discussing a stock-for-stock merger, though are still weeks away from an agreement. Deutsche Telekom would put T-Mobile executives led by CEO John Legere in charge of the combined companies. Both companies declined to comment. Well, European leaders will warn the world's biggest tech giants that they face fines unless they remove terrorist content from the internet within 2 hours of it appearing. We'll bring you all the details next. This is Bloomberg. Now to a story we continue to watch. The Senate Intelligence Committee expects representatives of Facebook to testify at a public hearing examining Russia's use of social media to influence last year's U.S. presidential election. According to Chairman Richard Burr, a North Carolina Republican, the panel hasn't determined all of the issues that will be covered or invited company representatives. He said the hearing, though, may also include Twitter and other social media companies. For more, I want to get straight to our Bloomberg tech reporter, Sarah Fryer, who covers Twitter and Facebook, and still with us, Eric Hippo of Lara Hippo Ventures. So, Sarah, what do you make of this? What do we know?
So Burr is basically saying if Facebook says they don't have much to hide and they want to be transparent and cooperative, how about do it in the public? So although a date for a hearing hasn't been set, this is something that is very important to the senators. Obviously, Facebook, we know, has given more information about the ads related to the Russian spending to Mueller's commission, the special commission looking into this. So we are very much looking forward to anything that we can hear in the public eye.
So does this mean we could see Mark Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg testifying before Congress?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that could be a possibility. We could also see perhaps Facebook's head of security, anyone who might have more specific information about how this looks, maybe that they're looking into it on a granular level. But nothing's been confirmed yet.
Eric, what's your take on this story?
My take is that the issue is actually bigger than just the Russian hack or whatever. I think we're entering a new relationship with our big tech companies. We, for years, have left them alone. It was a completely laissez-faire attitude because we want them to grow and we want them to innovate. But then suddenly it's dawned on us as a society, as users and as government, that they're really not transparent. They're not telling us what they're doing. They change their algorithms without any thought or any other expectations. They deal with our data in ways that, for instance, we just learned that they allowed people to target racists and white supremacists. How is that possible? So they hide in some ways behind this notion that they're just a utility, that they're not responsible for the content, they're not responsible for how the platform is being used. And I think that society, as users and as government, we're now saying that can't be true. You have to have responsibility, you have to take charge of what's going on your own platform.
Sarah, another story that just crossed, European regulators are going to be telling tech companies that they are going to be fined if they don't take down terrorist-related content in a matter of hours, which I wonder, is that possible, and what might the reaction be?
I think that's absolutely going to be something that the companies will say is very difficult. Of course, Twitter today announced that it had removed a few 100,000 accounts from ISIS.
300,000 accounts that they removed. That's a lot.
That's a lot. It's 20% less than this time last year, but maybe that means that they're doing something to address the issue. The problem the European regulators say is that they want the companies to address this content within 2 hours of when it goes up. That is very difficult for something. Facebook has more than 2 billion users now, and it's very difficult for them to police all that content. What the UN wants to do is get these companies to start thinking about this at a technological level. Is there a way that they can address this issue at scale without having to hire thousands of contractors to pour through this, or is that just an impossibility?
And yet it's a problem, obviously, they've known about for a long time. Eric, do you think it's fair for them to say, we can't do it, it's too big?
No, it's not. And the palliative, the measures that they've taken so far don't seem to be working that well. Facebook has added a few thousand curators, there's more technology, etc., but they're not doing enough. And they're certainly not reassuring us that they're doing enough on this matter.
Facebook, though, did say that they are hiring 3,000 extra workers to flag content. Go ahead, Sarah. We have 30 seconds.
I see that 3,000 workers cited in every post from Facebook on a problem they're trying to address. Those 3,000 workers are dealing with ad fraud, fake news, hateful content, violent video, all these things. It's very interesting how much they're able to cope with.
Well, they have a lot on their plate, apparently. Sarah Fryer of Bloomberg News. I know you'll keep us posted on all these stories. Eric Hippo of Lara Hippo Ventures. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Great to see you here in New York.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. That's it for today. This edition of Bloomberg Technology. This Wednesday, tune into Bloomberg TV for an unprecedented gathering of world leaders and international CEOs, all at the Global Business Forum. We will have Jack Ma right here on Bloomberg Technology.